Yes, welcome everyone. The Marijuana Times show for December 6th, 2017. I'm your host, Joe Klare. You can find myself and many other great writers over at marijuanatimes.org. We cover all the latest in cannabis news in the industry, and what's going on with legislation, the culture, the community, all of that. marijuanatimes.org. You find these videos there as well, and you can share them. Of course, don't forget the Marijuana Times show is now an audio podcast on Apple Podcasts. Search Apple Podcasts for the Marijuana Times, and you will find the Marijuana Times show. We got a lot of great stories to talk to you about today, including some news out of Europe, the latest roundup, if you will, of cannabis news out of Europe. Also, how a government shutdown could lead to a medical marijuana crackdown from the federal government, and Maryland running out of marijuana. That's right. Doesn't seem like something that could happen, but you put enough restrictions and regulations and throw up enough roadblocks, well, you can even have a shortage of a thing like marijuana. But first, of course, I got to tell you, the awesome sponsor of the Marijuana Times show is naturesidecannabis.com. All natural pesticides, organic pesticides. They are, well, if you're a grower, if you're a cannabis grower in a state where it's legal, you need naturesidecannabis.com. You need their products, you need their expertise, whether you have regulations that you need to meet in the state that you're in, and of course you don't want your customers getting harmful products and associating you with harmful products. So you want to eliminate all of that. You don't want to use harmful pesticides. You want to grow safe and poison free with naturesidecannabis.com, a proud sponsor of the Marijuana Times show. This first story, as mentioned, from marijuanatimes.org, is a European cannabis news roundup. There's a lot of things going on over in Europe. You will learn about it all, of course. Go to marijuanatimes.org. A couple of these stories are rather interesting. For instance, Dutch seed companies forging global partnerships. Two of the Netherlands' most successful seed companies announced partnerships with companies beyond European borders this month. Greenhouse Brands, whose roster includes Greenhouse Seeds Co. and Strain Hunters brands, partner with two equally heavyweight cannabis companies, Canadian Canopy Growth and Colorado-based Organa Brands. The joint venture will see all three companies owning a part of Canopy Growth's huge indoor grow facility, AgriFarm, in Creemore, Ontario. In return, Canopy Growth will have the option to purchase all cannabis products produced by AgriFarm for distribution in Canada, giving Greenhouse and Organa a significant Canadian presence. Also, Barney's Farm, who run a successful seed company and offer multiple coffee shops in Amsterdam, they invested $2.1 million in the Tel Aviv-listed Israel-based medical cannabis outfit Medivie Therapeutic Limited as a licensing deal in exchange for shares of Medivie being able to use Barney's Farm branding on its future products. Malta is moving to improve medical cannabis access. The Prime Minister there announced that the cabinet has agreed on new legislation to improve the access to the medical cannabis. This followed calls from cannabis law reform groups and MPs. Same patients are forced onto the black market since there are no legal ways for them to get their cannabis as a medicine, despite it being legalized in Malta for medical use since 2015. In Poland, legislation came into effect that will allow Polish pharmacies to distribute and prepare medicines from imported cannabis. In Greece, Bloomberg is reporting that more than 1.5 billion euros, which is $1.74 billion, has been injected into projects to build facilities for the cultivation and manufacture of cannabis in Greece. It's expected this investment will give Greece a significant share of the global cannabis market, worth up to $240 billion within the next 10 years. That is a lot of green. Yes, that's right. It's a pot pun. I will do them from time to time. The High Times Cannabis Cup is returning to Amsterdam after a hiatus lasting several years. High Times returned to Amsterdam to celebrate the 30th anniversary of its famous Cannabis Cup. High Times decided to take a break a couple years ago and focus on the U.S. after suffering harassment from Dutch authorities. This will make High Times one of the leading cannabis trade show organizations on the planet, which of course they already are. Returning to Amsterdam, they also have events planned in Jamaica and Spain in the coming months, if you were interested in going to something like that. This next story comes from Forbes.com. Government shutdown could allow Sessions, Attorney General Jeff Sessions, to launch a marijuana crackdown. Funding for the federal government is set to run out on Friday unless Congress enacts a bill extending current spending levels before the midnight deadline. Also set to expire is a current rider that prevents the Department of Justice from interfering with state medical cannabis laws. Now, if lawmakers fail to enact this extension, the marijuana protections would disappear. But because drug enforcement agents are considered, quote, accepted, end quote, from furloughs, the Justice Department would be newly empowered to enforce federal cannabis prohibition wherever it wants, regardless of state laws. So this basically means that if the protections are not extended and they are stripped from law, and the fact that under a shutdown, drug enforcement agents will still be working and continuing investigations and whatnot, it could possibly give Jeff Sessions an open door towards a crackdown on states where medical marijuana is legal. Also, federal prosecutors are the same. As presidential appointees, U.S. attorneys are not subject to furlough, according to the shutdown plan. Accepted employees are needed to address ongoing criminal matters and criminal matters of urgency throughout the nation. Criminal litigation will continue without interruption as an expected activity to maintain the safety of human life and protection of property. So in other words, the prosecutors and the agents that would carry out such crackdown will still be working even if the government shuts down, which will strip the protections that medical marijuana states now have, as long as they, it prevents the Department of Justice from using funds to go after state legal businesses, which could be a confluence of events that could possibly lead to a medical marijuana crackdown. Whether a shutdown happens, of course, that remains to be seen, and whether or not Jeff Sessions uses that to go after medical marijuana also remains to be seen. Because we're looking at a scenario where there's a shutdown, but the shutdown only lasts 4 or 5 days, and an emergency rider is, or emergency spending bill is passed, and then includes the rider, which then takes away the ability of the prosecutors and the agency or the Department of Justice to go after medical marijuana businesses that are legal in that state, in the state that they operate in. So, what are they going to do? They're going to crack down for 4 or 5 days and then stop? I don't think they would even start. There's no way to tell if a government shutdown have to last for a while. And then also have to be confident that when a spending bill was enacted, that it wouldn't have the rider. It just sounds like a lot of work. That's not to say that they won't do it. Obviously, if nobody would be surprised if Jeff Sessions came out and said, hey, the rider's gone and now we're medical marijuana crackdown, here it comes, and unleashes U.S. attorneys and the DEA and all that. That'd be rather unfortunate, but I don't think that's going to happen. I really don't think the government's going to shut down, but even if it does, I don't think a crackdown will be imminent. Hopefully I don't regret saying that on video for posterity for all time. This last story is out of Maryland. It's from Marijuana Business Daily. After a 4-year-plus wait, medical cannabis sales at a handful of the state's 10 fully licensed dispensaries began Friday to patients who waited in line for hours, but dispensary owners didn't receive as much product as hoped and were forced to limit customers to smaller quantities than they were legally allowed to buy. Store shelves were nearly empty within days, leaving shop owners in Maryland waiting on additional supply to start selling again. The flower supply went first, but some stores still had Dixie Elixir products for sale. Only one grower, Curio Wellness, is currently providing flower to Maryland's dispensaries, and there simply isn't enough to go around. Maryland has awarded 14 cultivation licenses, but Curio is the only one with product ready at the moment, which of course leads to the aforementioned shortage. Hiccups like Maryland is experiencing aren't uncommon in the marijuana industry as new state markets come online each year. For example, Hawaii's rollout this year looked very similar, with the supply shortage forcing dispensaries to temporarily close not long after beginning sales. Now, there's one of the problems with having a state government in charge of this. The timing is not right. Obviously, before dispensaries open and start selling flower, you want to have time for the growers and the cultivators and the processors to be up and running, because they need a few months lead time to grow the crops and the harvest and all that. You want them going first and you want to have supply so when the dispensaries do open, the supply will be ready. But I guess you could do it this way as well and just, very haphazard and make people wait in line to get less than they're legally allowed to buy and make them wait before more comes. If you want to go that route, go ahead. But if, it seems like something that would want to be planned better. You got to have the product before you can sell the product. Seems like common sense, but what do you know? What do I know? What do any of us know? Maybe Maryland's doing it the right way. Maybe shortages is the way to go. But I doubt it. Thanks everybody for checking us out. That is the Marijuana Times show for December 6th, 2017. Go to marijuanatimes.org, of course, for these videos, news, and more. Thank you to naturesidecannabis.com for being a sponsor of the show. Organic, all-natural pesticides, naturesidecannabis.com. For a cultivator in a legal state you want to go, check them out. You want to check us out on Apple Podcasts, search the Marijuana Times show. If you want to sponsor the show, of course, info at marijuanatimes.org. Come let us know that you would like to sponsor the show, and we will talk about that. Keep sharing these, like them, comment, all that stuff. Thank you to everybody who listens and comments and shares and checks us out every day. Still a relatively new show, growing all the time. That's thanks to you spreading the truth about cannabis and helping us spread information and much needed education about the cannabis plant. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time here on the Marijuana Times show.